better nerd out, better put specs on, better break necks on. I cut handsome checks for my expansion sets. They call me Obi.
What's going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by my friend. You know him. Give it up for Bouff.
That's me. Hey, I am Bouff, and it's the bearded comic bro, and we're back. You know why we're here. What are we doing, my man?
We're doing our 5th episode of Craft and Comics. We're on number 5. And so I brought this idea to you, and I said, why don't we do a segment of Craft and Comics where we talk about, wait, that movie's a comic?
Mm-hmm. People don't know.
Right. There's so many movies out there that are based off of comics, based off of graphic novels. There are some that have a lot of connection to the comics. There are some that don't have a lot. And so we figure we're going to talk about some movies in this series that are connected with comics. And I think it's going to be a blast and fun. And as always, before we jump into the comics and our main topic, we've got to talk about the craft part of our show.
Absolutely. We have to bring in the beer.
That's right. So, Boof, what are you drinking today?
Today, I got a little leftover from my stash of last time, my visit to Trillium. This is part of their IPA street series. All the streets surrounding the original brewery location, just their series of signature IPAs, varying degrees of tropical, citrus, piney, what have you. This happens to be Stillings Street. They have done variants of every single one of them, dry hopping the holy bejesus out of every one of them. This is just one of the regular ones, but still a hot bomb. You got a nice, thick, white, foamy head there, just bursting with fruity goodness, but some of that little peppery aroma too.
Ooh, nice.
And mango, like boom, right in your face, but it's a nice, dry, bitter finish. This is not, again, it's not a New England IPA. It's not a juice bomb,
right?
But it's just a good, tropical, but crisp, easy drinking, smooth IPA. It's not chewy. I've had enough of those chewy juice bombs. It's not a mouthful. Easy drinking, smooth. It's unfiltered. I mean, you cannot see through this sucker.
No,
and it's just absolutely delicious. The head is still sitting there, and I'm just, I'm gonna drink some more and maybe tell us about yours.
So we didn't even tell you guys what we're talking about. We're talking about the movie The Rocketeer today, and you can't talk about The Rocketeer and not bring out a beer that is called Flyer. What? So Flyer, this comes from a brewery called Warped Wing, and it's a brewery in Dayton, Ohio, and they have everything in Dayton is airplanes and all that stuff because they are known for the Air Force Museum, which is really cool. They usually have some of the old Air Force Ones that aren't in commission that you can actually go and walk on and see some of those. So that's really cool. So it's a brewery, though, out of Dayton. It's Flyer. This is an American lager. So I don't hit you guys with the American lagers typically. So we usually give you guys the IPAs. Like I said, I'm a big time sour brewery fan, so I go to those places all the time and pick up all their sours. But this is just your pale ale. It's going to give you all your different, your typical notes that you would have on your pale ale. It's a smooth beer. So we've talked our beers.
Mm-hmm.
We gave you guys a hint of what we're talking about with, wait, that movie's a comic?
Yes.
So let's talk comics.
I can feel your anger. It gives you focus.
All right, comic fam. So we are talking that 1990s goodness, The Rocketeer.
Absolutely.
It is one of my childhood favorite movies. It's set in the 1930s. You've got your Cliff Secord is your superhero power, right? He gets the rocket. You've seen The Rocketeer, right, Boof?
Yeah. Well, she has metal skin and she kind of has that cone head, shaped helmet, and she got her powers from this like living liquid metal, and her husband died in the accident, and she feels real bad, and Grant Morrison created her, but it's not in the 30s. It was in like 2009.
Boof. I said we're talking the Rocketeer.
Right.
You are thinking the Bullet Tier.
No.
Yeah.
No, Grant Morrison, Seven Soldiers of Victory, and in the 90s, silver skin.
Nope.
And she can fly and stuff.
We're talking Dave Stevens, the Rocketeer.
Oh, come. Yeah, I know the Rocketeer.
Do you?
Yeah, he flies around. He has a rocket and fights bad guys, right?
Yeah. This is going to be a real informative show.
Yeah. All right, go ahead. Talk about the Rocketeer. I'm doing something.
Okay. So, for all you out there that aren't familiar with the Rocketeer, Boof, we are talking about this movie. Was fantastic. Like I said, it came out in my childhood. I loved it. 1991 it came out. Joe Johnston directed it. And this, Joe Johnston, you don't know his movies, you don't watch superhero movies. Boof. Are you doing research right now?
No, grocery lists and stuff. Give me a minute. I'll be right back.
Two hours later.
Hey, sorry to keep you waiting. I hope I wasn't gone too long.
No, not at all. So, Rocketeer, you with me?
Rocketeer, Cliff Secord.
Yes.
Mr. Peavy.
Yes.
And the GB. Punching Nazis.
That's what we're talking about right there.
That is the Rocketeer we all know and love.
Bam. So yeah, we're talking the Rocketeer. And a lot of people, this is one of those movies that I feel like people go, okay, sure, it makes sense that it was a comic. But I don't think a lot of people know that it started as a comic.
Oh, definitely no.
And it was created by Dave Stevens. And was really cool about it from, I have the Rocketeer's first appearance here, right here.
Starslayer.
Which is in Starslayer. So this was Pacific Comics released it. And the Rocketeer story actually came in the back of this comic. So just in kind of sections. And so this was issue 2, I believe, of Starslayer. Yeah. So issue 2 of Starslayer, they had the Rocketeer's first appearances in the back of this. Issue 3, they did the second chapter of the Rocketeer story. And you just get a really cool origin story of the Rocketeer there. And then they kind of spread out the rest of the story. It's, I think, 5 chapters through some other comics and stuff like that. So then they collected all these, the first 5, put it in a trade. And you didn't see too much Rocketeer comics from there. So I guess, Boof, I'm curious, what's your kind of connection and familiarity then with the Rocketeer yourself?
Well, of course, like most people, it started with the movie. I was too young for that particular comic right there. I wasn't, collecting comics that early. Also, I was 2. So, when the movie came out, I remember it was a family trip. Dude puts on a jetpack. He has this awesome gold helmet. He has kind of like a super suit, pilot costume. Like, that was awesome. I only learned after the fact that it was a comic. And only recently did I actually start reading the books and come to find out that there's some of today's top talent doing those Rocketeer comics. It's a popular enough character that it draws in the big talent. They love Dave Stevens. Mm-hmm. They thought that it didn't see the light of day, really. So few comics back in the day, backup stories at that, and then
right,
those trades are probably worth some bank because not many published because
No.
they're just, there wasn't a call for it back then. There wasn't an appetite. But the one that I really dove into was Mark Waid and Chris Samney. You know him from those awesome runs on Daredevil. Samney did a stint on Captain America, I think, maybe with Mark Waid too. That's A-list creators right there. And they just take the Rocketeer out of what we saw in the movies, beyond what the comics did. New Adventures, still we're looking at the early 40s now, but it's not just straight up Nazi punching. It's not just damsel in distress. There's complexity in the characters. There's wacky adventures. What I particularly liked about the Waid Samney miniseries was that it goes outside that normal pulp comics thing. So it's not just gangsters and mafia and, suck it to them sort of thing, because this book has dinosaurs and ray guns. And I like when my genres cross-pollinate. I love that, kind of Buck Rogers pulp comic era, and to weave that into the Rocketeer while still having it fairly grounded, that was really attractive. And Samney's art really has that throwback kind of Steve Ditko, really simplistic but clean quality to it that really drew me in. And that's why I enjoyed that particular miniseries above all the other stuff that I read.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, because I think most of us watching this, our connection with the Rocketeer is the movie. Like, that's
Absolutely.
our first, that's what we got hooked. That's what we watched as kids. And then, I'd pick up a Rocketeer comic here or there in the dollar bins and, at secondhand stores trying to figure out. And when we were talking about this, I was like, I want to dig deeper into the Rocketeer comics. And I was expecting there to be a lot more than there really is.
No.
There's very few. So you have that Mark Waid 4 mini that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another kind of mini in the midst of there. There's a newer trade now that's out that takes the first 5 stories of the Rocketeer that Dave Stevens worked on, that were in the Star Slayer, the Pacific Comics issues and stuff. Dark Horse released a 3-issue series in 1995.
Ooh.
And that was where it's called Cliff's New York Adventure. And he kind of is like, Cliff Secord is, it branches out of that, your 1930s, 1940s punching Nazis genre a little bit, and kind of more of like it feels very much like a Robin origin story, as Cliff he's a part of a circus, and there's all of a sudden people in the circus start to die off, and Cliff is trying to figure out, well, because Cliff's going to be next, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of goes off rails of what you would expect in the Rocketeer. So that came out in 95, I think, by Dark Horse. And then IDW collected those, the first 5 Rocketeer, that story smashed together in 2009 for a collected trade, which easily pick up on Comixology. You can find it at your local store easily. And what's really cool about that, you and I were talking before show, the first 5 issues, so these are all done by Dave Stevens here. And so the first issue was drawn back in 1982. So this is being dropped in 2009. And I think what they did, they wanted to kind of try and find a way to connect the 82 style now with 2009, because newer comic fans sometimes struggle getting into the older books, right? Because of how they look and stuff. And they brought on Laura Martin to color. And it's the same story. It's the same art, but the coloring is different. And I will tell you this, it pops so much. It reads like a 2009 book for that. I mean, in the midst of reading it, I was like, I wonder how close this is to the original Rocketeer story. And I read, I'm like, oh, this is the exact same thing, except for just the coloring's different. And Laura Martin is a fantastic color. She's, I think, like 2-time Eisner Award winner. You probably know her from, she's worked with Mark Waid, but I think you know her more from the run that she did with Warren Ellis.
Absolutely. Planetary. Oh, man, that is an Image/Wildstorm book that must be on everyone's reading list. Like, that's, we mentioned a time or two, pulp comics. Like, it's a throwback to all that pulp sci-fi, Buck Rogers sort of stuff. Like, that is a vibrantly colored series with all the weirdness they get into it. And I actually didn't know that she colored that Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely, JLA Earth 2.
Yep.
That is a fantastic book that I own. Actually, Frank signed it for me at a con years ago, and I had no idea. It's a beautiful looking book. Colorists don't get the credit they deserve, and she is fantastic at what she does.
And I feel like as a comic fan, I've actually dropped the ball on appreciating colorists. But going through this process, really, like, to just see the difference, it shows me like how important the colorists really are to the story, and how they can affect it one way or the other. So, because I mean, yeah, we always talk about the artists, we always talk about the writers, but there are so many other people involved in a comic book that often get overlooked. And I think colorists, because I think they just get lumped in with the art sometimes, and it's like, and
Absolutely
is fantastic. So a little bit about Rocketeer Comics. I think we should talk about, though, we kind of hit a little bit already, what people got hooked on the Rocketeer for. And we're going to talk about the movie Walt Disney's presents The Rocketeer.
Not a lot of people got hooked on it right away, though. It was a box office bomb.
It was. It really was. So I'm doing some research and stuff. It got positive reviews. Critics gave it positive reviews, but it only made $46 million at the box office. Like, it is considered a flop. And I think
it was up against, it had some A-list stuff at the theater that it was fighting against. So
opening weekend,
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves,
Kevin Costner. Come on,
that film stands the test of time. I mean,
okay,
he's not even an English accent Robin Hood, and it was still awesome.
It still is. You've seen all these Robin Hood remakes, and it's still considered number 2 that opened up at the box office that weekend. City Slickers. Are you kidding me? Another movie has stood the test.
So ridiculous, but it's so awesome. Billy Crystal is fantastic.
It's so good. So, I mean, it got slated right there against some heavy hitters right off the bat. And so I think because it's not a bad movie. You watched it recently. I rewatched it recently, and it still holds. Like, your one knock on a 1991 movie is the CGI flying can be a little like, okay, that's 30 years ago. If that's your beef with a movie, get over it. Like,
right, absolutely.
The story.
The studios weren't planning their release dates. They didn't know what everyone else was doing. Remember when you didn't know a movie was coming out until you saw a trailer at the movie theater? Like, back then, things weren't as properly timed. If they moved that thing back a couple of months, it could have done, like, I don't know, $70 million maybe?
Yeah, and because, I mean, we talk about it too. What's interesting is it was a fairly unknown cast. So I think that also, now we know the cast nowadays, and we're like, really? But
notable people.
Right. But I mean, it was fairly unknown at the time. And I think that probably when you're going up against some heavy hitters like those, everyone knew Kevin Costner, everyone, like, that's tough to do. But I mean, it's loaded. I think its heaviest hitter was Timothy Dalton in it.
Absolutely. And that was fresh off his first Bond film, I believe.
I'm trying to remember what the time frame was, but I mean, if you know Timothy Dalton, he was Bond. So, like, that would have been the draw for people. But it just is a really good story of,
absolutely,
it's everything you want. You've got your romance, you've got your action, you've got your kind of mentor, young gun superhero kind of relationship between Cliff and Peavy, who is played by the fantastic Alan Arkin.
Absolutely.
Like, but it was a really good movie. And I remember watching it and just being captivated. Like, Timothy Dalton plays a very good villain, who comes off, he's a Hollywood actor in this movie who is a Nazi spy, which, let's go. That's a great storyline right there off the bat.
Yeah.
Because that was actually a issue back in the day. There was always concerned. Like there's a lot of stories about that. What's the other movie with Jim Carrey, The Majestic? They delve into that storyline a lot too, with kind of the Nazi relationships in American Hollywood and stuff. But yeah, great. I'm babbling. Boof, tell me what you loved about. I know you already talked a little bit about The Rocketeer, but what makes it stand the test of time for you? Like, why are we talking about The Rocketeer now?
Well, it's a well executed superhero story. You know, I don't know that I went into it expecting like, hey, it's a superhero. It's a dude with a jetpack and a cool costume. So obviously I'm gonna go see this. I'm gonna ask my folks to go to the movies. But it compares nowadays to that Captain America origin story. You know, it's a period piece. It's the origin story that, you know, it kind of falls into his lap by chance because, you know, he's deserving. You know, they're looking for the jetpack and they find it in the cockpit, and, you know, all of a sudden he's gonna, you know, throw this outfit together, and he and PV develop the outfit, and then, you know, Nazi punching, and Timothy Dalton is the bad guy, and, you know, it's just, and Howard Hughes and
Who
is it Terry O'Quinn?
Yes, who I love from Lost.
John Locke is
Like,
Howard Hughes.
Terry O'Quinn is one of those actors I feel like I didn't know about him until Lost, but then you go back and watch any movie before,
Absolutely.
he's
He's
in that, he's an old school, he's in all these movies I grew watching, but I didn't know until I watched Lost. And
but it's just, you know, it's the accuracy of the period, the weaving in those real life people that's cool. And, you know, at the end, he saves the day, and Hughes is happy, he gets his jetpack back, but he has the blueprints, and he gives him the replacement chewing gum, and it's a nice finale. The cool thing is, while I was doing research for this episode, apparently there is a sequel series up for Disney Plus.
Yes.
That's insane and awesome.
Also, in doing the research, I found out that there actually is a current Rocketeer show on Disney Junior, following Cliff Secord's granddaughter, who becomes a Rocketeer.
Good. We need more strong, positive female role models.
Yes. So it's a very Disney Junior show. So what's interesting with this, though, you mentioned how it's very reminiscent of Captain America.
Absolutely.
One of the first movies I ever saw of Joe Johnston's came out 2 years before Rocketeer was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, amazing.
And then he did The Page Master with Macaulay Culkin. There was another one that was Jumanji with Robin. So those are these are like my childhood movies I remember watching. And I know he did stuff. He's done a lot more. He kind of seemed like he did a hiatus, and then he started to do stuff again. And I even made a reference that he did Marvel movies that we should be familiar with, and I completely forgot until you were talking about. It seems the Rocketeer storyline lines up very similar to Captain America: The First Avenger. Well, guess who directed both movies?
Oh, no way.
Yes, Joe Johnston directed The Rocketeer and Captain America: The First Avenger.
I actually had no idea. That's what good observation that was by me.
And so I guess that was the only Marvel movie he did. And I was thinking it was a different Marvel movie at the time, but so yeah, and so you see the similarities of the Rocketeer. Now I want to watch Captain America: The First Avenger, and with the Rocketeer first on my mind. But yeah, it was a fun movie, and I think it's something that we forget that it started as a comic book series. It's, you know, we haven't even talked about his love interest, who in the comics is Betty Page, but she didn't want the name in the movie anyway. So in the movie, she's Jenny.
She actually said, I don't want to be associated with this. Like Betty Page had that kind of pull that she could say, nope, don't do that. Because
she's like, I don't want to. So yes, it's Jenny.
Icon.
Yeah. And she is played by another young actress at the time, Jennifer Connelly, who we know from hit movies after hit movies now here in days.
But before The Rocketeer, we knew her from Career Opportunities.
Right. And so I think that, you know, I thought Billy Campbell, who plays Cliff Secord, plays the Rocketeer, I thought he did great. There was debate early on of like, hey, we shouldn't have an unknown. And man, he hasn't been in a lot of movies since.
No.
I was looking up the IMDb stuff, like, because I'm like, all right, he's got to be in some. Really hasn't. So,
You expect to see him in like a background scene of the Golden Girls, or
right,
like dude number 5, or something at the party.
and so I wonder, I don't know about that, like how much that has. I'm guessing it has a lot to do. Your lead actor, movie, it busts, but he did a phenomenal job, I thought, in the movie.
Absolutely.
Rewatching it, it stands the test for me. But it's just as a fun movie. And I think if you go and watch The Rocketeer again, which you can now because it's on Disney Plus, go watch it. And I think if you watch the movie and then know that there's comic books out there about it, you're going to want to dig deeper into the comic mythos of Rocketeer. And it's not a deep dive. So you talked briefly about it. What would be your recommendation for someone who wants to jump into the Rocketeer after watching the movies, or like, hey, let's check out some of the comics a little bit?
You can check out that Wade and Samney miniseries. They got the Rocketeer Adventures, a couple of trades. One of them happens to have a Looney Tunes riff with Daffy Duck, the Ducketeer, and he fights a Marvin the Martian style Nazi. It's ridiculous. It's fun. The artist escapes me now, but his style is very similar to Bill Sienkiewicz, who I am a huge fan of. It's just kind of that really scratchy style pencils, and it's fitting for the type of ridiculous story.
And I know, because we both read Mark Waid's run, and you liked it a lot more than I did. And I realized that I'm the old man of the group, where I was like, that's not my Rocketeer.
And yet I'm older than you.
Right. But I'm like, no, I like my Rocketeer punching Nazis. I like my Rocketeer staying in the confines, which is why when I read that Rocketeer issue of Dave Stevens, who, fun fact, is actually the test pilot when they're in Howard Hughes' office in the Rocketeer, and they're showing the footage, that's Dave Stevens in the movie there.
Is it really?
Yeah. So
Okay.
Creator got to be in the movie. So I like that familiarity. I like the groundedness, and I'm saying groundedness of a character who has a rocket on his back. But and I was really enjoying that story that Wade was writing. And I had a sense what was coming. You can read it the first couple issues, but then once like the dinosaurs kind of hit in the third and fourth,
it went like boom, like out of.
I was like,
the guy get his hands bit off, and I thought, maybe it was a tiger or something. But
right.
I was hoping it was a monster, and it paid off. And then the ray gun and stuff. And yes, it is absolutely far-fetched because the Rocketeer is supposed to be a real type of hero, a more believable type of action hero. And then you have a ray gun that blows the upper torso off a dinosaur in the middle of a Hollywood street. So that does take it out of the believability, however ridiculous that is to say about comic books.
Right. Which I get it. It's a silly beef I have, but I will say so obviously read the Rocketeer that Dave Stevens did. I guess you can get that on Comixology for free. It's great. But if you want to dig into the Rocketeer and kind of find your niche, so like, okay, where I'm at, you talked about the Rocketeer Adventures #2 with the Ducketeer and stuff. I'm gonna recommend though Rocketeer Adventures, the first trade that they did.
Is that an Alex Ross cover?
So that's what we're saying. These are the people that are connected to the Rocketeer. So it's a Rocketeer cover. You've got Alex Ross artwork on some of these. You've got a Mark Waid story. You've got Bruce Timm, who is in my heart. You've got Dave Gibbons. And if you know anything about comics and Watchmen, you know Dave Gibbons. And so it is a who's who of creators in this. And there are going to be some stories that hit for you. There are going to be some stories where you go, no, definitely. I think the Rocketeer Adventures, so whether you go 1 or 2 like you did, I did 1, you did 2. What's really cool is it's one of those collected trades that they're 5-page stories. You can find something that hits for you. You're probably going to say that won't hit. But it's just a really cool, I think it's a cool character. And I'm surprised, honestly, that there hasn't been more lately with it in the midst of everything. Because I think it's a cool character that has potential to go. But I don't know, maybe not. Because maybe people don't like dinosaurs and Rocketeers. Man, I love talking to Rocketeer. I was excited. Like I said, I knew the movie. I went into a deeper dive into the comics, and I'm glad I did. I'm going to continue checking out some that I haven't yet. I'm going to read Adventures, Rocketeer Adventures Volume 2 because I got that too. But yeah, I picked Comixology. I picked up local comic book shops and back bins, secondhand stores. Like, you can find these books.
Smash that like button. Definitely subscribe to the Bearded Comic Bro. I'm eventually going to have a channel. I'm doing some stuff, but definitely sync into him. He's got some great content aside from crafting comics, unboxing videos. He's involved with members of the YouTube comic community. Check us out on IG. Check out our club, the Comic Collective. It's just, if you're looking for your nerd fix, this is where it's happening.
We'll help you get that nerd fix. And drop a comment of what you guys thought about the movie The Rocketeer. Drop a comment of movies you want us to talk about, because I know I know we're talking to some of you guys. If you're watching comic book shows, you're probably not unfamiliar with some of these that we're going to talk about, movies that are comics and stuff like that. But there are some that I'm really excited for, and I'm not even going to spoil them. So just tune in. You're going to be
let's leave them.
But if you have some that you want us to talk about, it might bump it up on the list if you guys drop it in the comments. Let us know what movies that you know of that were comic books before movies that might. So don't be dropping Iron Man we all know it's a comic book movie. We're talking obscure movies, maybe that people didn't watch, or obscure comics. So we're gonna have all these people in the comments like, oh, have you guys watched Iron Man? What about the Avengers or Batman?
Except for Cowboys and Aliens. That I promise you, we will never talk about that on this show. It was a terrible film.
Oh no,
terrible.
Yeah. I think if we're ever going to talk about terrible comic book movies, it's going to be because we're going to talk with them with nostalgia glasses on. And
no, this is just a bad film.
Yeah, Cowboys and Aliens. We saw that when we didn't have nostalgia glasses, so we won't talk about that. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have made it this far, as always, if you want to watch more episodes of Crafting Comics, make sure you guys click the links, click on the playlist here. We always are doing Crafting Comics probably every other week. We're excited. We got a lot of good content coming out.
Absolutely.
You guys have ideas, let us know.
As long as you're still watching.
Yeah. And even if you're not,
we're still going to do
comics, so we don't care. We're going to still produce.
Right. Our wives will watch.
Yeah. No, my wife doesn't watch.
No, mine either.
I made a joke that I was like, you don't watch anything I do online unless you're involved in it. She goes, no. I was like, I didn't think so. So with that being said, make sure you guys like, subscribe. And as always, I hope you guys can find some time to curl up, read a comic, and just nerd out.